Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are hangingontohope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given. This is Karen W. Today we have Patrick Doyle on our show. Patrick Doyle has over 30 years of working with people from all over in treatment centers, churches, and through his professional office. Patrick's own story of emotional and physical abuse has resonated with many. His personal story of pain and survival has filled others with hope. So welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having this podcast.
Oh, thank you for what you do.
Yes, definitely.
We all need that
validation. Continuing with part 2 of Boundaries with Patrick Doyle.
Experiencing pain from someone a little or a lot over time can build up. And that is why we get to this place where a boundary has to be set in order for a relationship to continue.
Yep.
This can be in any relationship, not just a marriage, but I mean, and, you know, that's where the main context we're talking about it here, but it can also be friendships, work relationship, a family member, etc. Can you explain why trying to set a boundary in a reactive state is not the best time to do it? You kind of were saying like, you know, you can, sometimes you just, in your in the heat of the moment, you may say something that you know you can't enforce.
So one of my rules of thumb for boundary setting is always set a boundary you know you can keep. When you're in a reactive state, you're overreaching generally because what you want is relief or you want the end to a situation. And so you tend to shoot too far. And so setting a boundary you can't keep actually empowers the person who's harming you. Mm. So if you set one that's small, that you can keep. And this is what I'm saying. Trust your gut, trust your instincts that I can do that. But in a reactive state, we never make good decisions. So, and hey, being in a reactive state is going to happen if you're in an abusive situation, but I would really encourage people to set boundaries that they know they can keep and inch your way forward, because each little success builds your strength instead of going too far, getting run over, and then being defeated and weak.
Yeah, that's going to make you not want to set any more boundaries.
Yeah, because you're like, no, they're just going to hurt me. And no. So, you know, that's like, say, like, I'm not going to sleep with you for 2 weeks unless, you know, whatever. I mean, and the other thing is, this is the other trouble I have with boundary setting is like, look, everybody has a context to their situation, and that context is really important. I want to know, how safe is it? Is he dangerous physically? Is he dangerous financially? Is he dangerous to the kids? Is he dangerous, you know, verbally, emotionally? What's the context? What resources do you have? Who do you have in your life that you can trust? Who do you know that will take your side? Who do you know that's a dangerous person? You know, how much money do you have? Where are your kids safe? And you have to assess all of that to really understand how to set an effective boundary in your specific circumstance, which is why I always get worried about these blanket rules for boundary setting. I will talk about some principles that you can employ, but blanket rules about boundary setting, you gotta take into account the context of that person. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a bad place. It's difficult enough in its own when you know the context.
Right, definitely. You say that if it gets to a point that a boundary needs to be set, there's usually denial with the other person. Can you explain how it is actually very loving to set a boundary with someone that may be in denial but hurting us?
Yeah. So contrary to what we've been told, stopping someone who's harming you is the most loving thing you can do. And their pain in that process is the one thing that I've never seen anybody change without pain, but I've also seen people take pain and never change. So pain is always an integral part of someone's process. And if you're in denial about what they're doing to you and how they're harming you, then there's no hope of them changing. If you come out of denial and you see the harm and then you make a boundary, that is the only way that they're going to make a change. So if you deny it and allow it, I guarantee you they won't change. So this pain can be productive. And even if it's not for them, it will be for you because you'll get to see clearly what's happening. And that'll create more momentum. Like, okay, look, they did this. They harmed me. I set this boundary. They denied it. They rationalized it. They pushed past it. They continued to harm me. Now I have more and more evidence of, okay, this is what's happening. So M. Scott Peck, again, he said, denial is evil because you're living in a lie. So that's why I say the fulcrum for whether or not a relationship functions healthily is the level of denial that the people in it have. And in an abusive relationship, what you have is one person with Olympic level denial and another person being systematically destroyed by that and feeling crazy because they can't ever get resolution because that person never tells the truth about what happened, gaslights, rationalizes, minimizes, justifies, spiritualizes, and the other person is being destroyed. Okay. So if we could kill the denial in the abuser, we could move forward. But the problem is you don't have that power. So what you have to do is live in the reality of what kind of denial they have instead of blaming yourself for their inability to take responsibility. It has to stay on them. And I talk about this all the time. The shame, toxic shame, is the result of misplaced blame, which means the healing of shame is to appropriately assign the blame. And when you start doing that, that's when things are going to change. And when you start appropriately assigning the blame, it'll make it very clear what your boundaries need to be.
Okay.
Now, whether or not you have the strength to do that, that's a whole nother story, which is why I want you to have some support and some people around you who can validate what you're seeing, validate who you are, and give you some safety. That's a process. And again, I'm saying these things very quickly, but every one of these situations is a process. It's not an event. And so you have to stay with the process to get to a place of change. And the place of change in an abusive relationship is never going to come easily. You're always going to go through a lot of difficulty to get there. Yeah. That's just the hardcore truth of it. And you can, if somebody's telling you that's not the case and they're giving you the 5 principles of how you can do it without that, they're selling you something that isn't true.
Right.
Yeah. So that's interesting how the shame and the boundaries do go together.
Exactly.
You shared some steps to setting good boundaries, like gathering information, documenting, and sitting with that internally first.
Yes.
And going over and adding or editing if needed, and then sharing with another safe person or a therapist to get feedback and to get, some validation. Can you share the importance of these steps and starting with your truth?
Okay. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who has a lot of denial, one of the main problems is they're always causing you to doubt your perception of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And if you doubt the perception of what happened, you're going to be victim to their outcome. They're going to tell you how it is and you're going to believe them and you're going to keep being eroded as a soul. Right. You're going to keep being eroded intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. Right. So I say this to women all the time. Look, one of my best friends is the voice memo on my phone because I'm a talker better than a writer. So I just hit that record button and blah, 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 blah. And if you listen to my recordings, you'd be like, I think that guy's lost his mind.
Do you store and save those or do you delete them after you do?
They're all saved. I encourage women to delete nothing. But here's the other thing I would say. Make sure that it's safe. And if I believe that someone else was going to listen to what I was just honestly sharing, I would never say it.
Right.
So you have to have safety. And I say to women all the time, your best friend is a blank page. Write as honestly as you can about what is happening. And this leads me to something else. Like when you're in a situation where somebody's gaslighting you or rationalizing or justifying or denying, so they say, hey, I think you're a bad person because you did this. And then tomorrow when you say, hey, you said I was a bad person because they're like, I didn't say that.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I journaled. I have all my journals that definitely kept me sane because I can look back and be like, no.
That's exactly why, because you have in your brain, you can't hold on to it. But if you go back and look at what you wrote, the reality, what happened 2 weeks later, 2 years later, 2 minutes later, what you wrote stays the same.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm a big believer in journaling.
It gives you clarity. If you can't journal, talk to a voice memo.
Yeah. Get it documented.
I've encouraged people to do vlogs. Just hit the video record button and record yourself. I did that a bunch. One of the reasons why I like voice memoing more than writing is because you can hear my voice. You can hear the inflection. I can hear the pain or I can hear the anger when I'm saying it. When I write, it's a lot harder to see. So for me, it's just
sometimes I can write angry though.
Yeah, well, trust me, I know people who can too, but based on some of my trauma, that's a harder thing for me to do, which is what I'm saying is what is best for you. That's what you need to do. But documenting that will start to give you clarity. And one of my clients once said, and I'm using this saying, they said it, it's not mine, but they said, clarity should come with a sign, grief up ahead.
Warning.
Right. Because clarity, while we desperately want it, it's the thing that's going to lead us into grief. And I'm telling you, my strong belief that grief is the doorway to freedom.
Yeah.
I believe that, you hear people talk about trauma bonds. And I think that's profoundly misunderstood, particularly in the abuse world. If you have two guys in a foxhole that survive war together, they become bonded together because of what they survived. That's the real definition of a trauma bond. I hear women all the time saying, I'm trauma bonded to my husband because he's hurt me. I'm like, no, that's not a trauma bond. What you're doing, I call it hopium. You're living in hopium. You're taking hopium like an opium addict would take opium. Mm-hmm. You keep holding on to hope to avoid the hard, cold reality of the harm. And every one of us does it. Yeah. It's always a miracle when we come off a hopium. When you're living in that denial, no one lives in a harmful situation without building an effective denial structure. It's part of surviving. Okay. So when we start getting clear, what it's going to do is poke at that reality and it's going to start bringing up the pain. And so I see it all the time with ladies. What they're holding on to is their dream. They want from the husband or from the relationship the dream they had when they stood at the altar of this great family and this beautiful kids and this great togetherness and this love and intimacy and care. Now that is a beautiful and healthy and glorious dream. But if you're living in that while they're harming you, you're going to be tortured. So the thing that gives the abuser power is you continuing to give CPR to the dead guy of your dream.
Still living in reality.
Yes. So as soon as you start seeing reality, the pain comes up and then the difficulty starts. And that, killing your own hopium, starting to sort of deconstruct your own denial structure, is where change starts. And I'm saying this with as much compassion as my soul can muster. Look, I denied it for 10 years. So I got no high ground here. I'm just saying that eventually something will happen and you'll get some clarity. And what I would encourage you to do when you get that clarity, you write it down, you voice memo it, you talk to your friend who's safe, and you get it out before your denial can change it.
Yeah. And I think when we did that podcast with Patrick Weaver, he kind of says, you were in love with what you thought they were, not what they actually were. So that's kind of the same as hopium.
Yes, it is. And listen,
I like the hopium.
I know, I like that term.
Word, we got hopium.
Yeah. And that hopium is what gives the abuser power. Yeah. It's not a trauma bond. Right. It's you denying the reality of what's happening and wanting something from the relationship that it has never given and has no evidence of ever being able to give.
Yeah. And I do think it's important going through healing myself, writing all that down. Like I didn't write journals like Karen did, but I wrote down all the events that happened because as you begin to heal and you go through EMDR therapy and different things and you heal your mind, like I'm in a good place. So I'm not thinking about those things that happened. So it is good to have them written down because my mind's not on those, but at least I still have the facts if I do need them. Yes.
Well, if you ever get into a situation where you start to doubt your history, you have it there to refer to.
Exactly. And that's important because when you heal, you don't want to think about it all the time.
No. When I think, and I say this to women all the time, look, when you start getting that clarity and you start to see how harmful that person is or how disregarding they are of your boundaries or whatever, it's so painful. Yeah. You don't want to see it.
Right. You just write it down and put it in your past.
I've encouraged women like, look, when that grief starts to come, in my upcoming book, I have a whole chapter on grief because I believe it's the doorway to freedom. And it's the thing that women need the most help walking through because there's so much horrible communication and information out there about grief. Right. And I say grief is like the waves of the ocean. You can't control when they come or how big they are, but you got to ride them.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about that on the podcast too. There's not a lot of focus on lamenting, which is very important, which is part of the grief.
Yeah,
It is.
Andrew
It
Bauman
is.
on the one we just did. He talks about grief too. He says the same exact thing as you.
Yep.
So nice to hear that. I
Yeah.
love the quote from your video. Freedom does not come from avoidance. We all know this can be true. Can you share a little more on that?
Yeah, well, so back to M. Scott Peck, the avoidance of pain is the beginning of all unhealthy behavior, and denial is evil. Like, you live in a lie, who's in charge?
Yeah, you
Who's
are.
in charge of the lies? And what's going to happen if you live in a lie? So, and unfortunately, I believe that the church has some responsibility here, because we say things like, forget what lies behind and press on towards the high calling of Christ, or forgive and forget, which is an absolute horrific statement.
That's what I did. That was horrible. That ruined it for me, because I had to forgive him every day.
Yes.
And I would say I choose to forget, because that's what I learned from a sermon once.
Yes.
And so I would forget, and I'd give it to the Lord and I'd forget, but it didn't help, because I have to remember. Otherwise I would have already be back with him.
Exactly. And
yeah,
so
it
listen,
doesn't make sense. You can't forget.
Don't you wish you could? I mean, I certainly wish I could. My life would be so much easier if I could just forget a bunch of stuff.
Yes, it absolutely would.
But I can't. And that idea is lunacy. So the other thing is, we say, God will work it out in heaven. Well, what about the 30 or 40 or 50 years I got here on this earth?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just going to avoid that to wait for heaven? So those are all tactics of spiritualized avoidance. And in the Old Testament, you have many occasions where God says to the Jews, hey, I want you to build an altar because I want you to remember what happened. If you don't remember, you're going to end up in a bad place.
Yeah. They'd have to build the well or build with the rocks.
Right. Make an altar. So everybody that comes by goes, oh yeah, that's right. I remember now. Because remembering what happened keeps you straight.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of all of this denial and spiritualizing of, oh no, just live, it's just all spiritual denial. And so denial is never going to lead you to freedom. Avoidance of what your actual situation is never going to lead you to freedom. The only thing that leads you to freedom is living in the reality of what you actually have, good or bad.
Right. Yeah. Jesus lives in reality. He doesn't live in denial.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I own a lot of books on boundaries, and I got them all out when I was going through this, and I loaned out a couple, but I still have a lot. They're all underlined and well read, but I still struggle to set them. And I thought this quote from one of my books, it was called Boundaries Face to Face by Townsend and Cloud, was really helpful. I love this quote. To the extent you allow someone to do something you resent, you are part of the problem. And then they quoted Leviticus 19:17 that says, do not hate your brother in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in his guilt. And it said in this book, to rebuke here means reason together or correct. This verse directly ties our resentment to our failure to talk to someone about something. In addition, if we avoid confrontation, we share guilt in the problem we're enabling. So anything you want to expound on with that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it gets a little muddy with that quote, because listen, someone harming you is always wrong on their part.
Yes.
So you're never, I say this all the time, you are never responsible for someone else's harm of you. But abusers are always saying it's your fault. Right. So I hear it all the time. Well, he had a tough childhood, or he's an alcoholic, or whatever. And I'm like, great, that's good. Okay, I was abused as a kid, but I'm not beating anybody up.
Right.
Your harm as a child does not justify your harm of anyone. In fact, it makes it twice as bad. Like, if you were harmed, why would you do that to someone else?
Right.
Yeah, you do have a choice.
So I would say, their harm of you is always their responsibility. I would also agree that you not saying something, you become complicit with their harm by being silent, which sends them a message that it's okay.
Right.
Right. And this is why confrontation and honest communication is what we're missing. But again, I want to just caution, you have to take into consideration the context that someone is in. In some cases, that kind of confrontation is too dangerous.
Right.
In other cases, it's not. But
it was too dangerous for me.
Yes.
It was too dangerous for me.
So the principle that I would encourage, not the action, the principle is assess your situation. And if your gut is telling you to confront, then do it. But I would also encourage this. If you have history with someone who has a lot of denial, I always encourage confrontation in writing. Couple reasons. One is You can edit what you write.
Yeah.
And you can take a week or 2 or 10 to write it. But in a conversation with someone who has power over you, very rarely is it going to come out well for you. So you write the confrontation and then you request that they write you back, not talk to you. Because if you can keep this in writing, we get a lot of clarity. The other thing about writing is you can show a third party to get some clarity.
Yes,
you can't.
My ex never, ever, he wouldn't let me ever write him a letter. From the very first time I wrote him a letter, he made fun of me and said that was stupid and that we never did that again after that.
Yeah. Well, of course not, because it keeps him off the record.
Exactly.
So I would encourage people to do it in writing. And in today's world, text, email, it's really easy. And do not ever delete that stuff. Hold on to it. But in terms of that confrontation, the optimum from my perspective is have it in writing. And if it can't be that, have a witness. That's safe.
Yeah, that would be safest route too, especially if there is some signs that it might not be safe.
And so you have to take all of those contexts into consideration when doing so.
Yeah. And I couldn't set boundaries because I would get beat up and then I'm silent, not respond, and I would get beat up. So if anyone listening is in that situation, you just have to get out.
Yes.
And that freedom came for me I had to set a big boundary with no contact, but it's been the best, most freeing thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Yeah.
I've encouraged no contact on so many occasions. And, the most vocal opponents of my suggestion are usually been churches.
Yeah, that happened to me too. One last boundary book quote. This is from Beyond Boundaries by Townsend. Dare to be honest, tell the truth. It is a value for you, but one that needs to be exercised in your life. Using it prevents you from trying to adjust reality in order to fit a bad situation. Once the truth is out, either you will help the other person change or you will face the matter squarely and adapt in a healthier way. And you will find that you're more attracted to people of the truth, the way you've become a person of the truth. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's great, by the way. I think that's well put. The thing that I would say is that being able to live in the truth is a continuum, not an either or. So I see it as a percentages thing. Like, let's say right now I live in 5% truth. What I want to be is in 5.5% truth, right? But it's not going to go from 5% to 50. You would explode. Wherever you're at, what you want to see is percentage level increases of the truth being in your life instead of beating yourself up for not being farther down the road. Don't dislocate your hip to kick yourself in the rear. It's a very difficult process. And so look at it in percentages. And unfortunately, a lot of times in our Christian language, we say things in victorious terms. You're a saint or you're a sinner. It's either or. I was sinner and then I got saved and everything's better. Never true. But we tend to use that kind of language. And so it makes us want to put things in extreme terms. And what I want you to do is be very honest with where you're at and then set goals of, okay, I want to live in the truth 0.05% more tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because listen, when you're in that battle, that's going to be more than you can actually handle probably.
Right.
So you have to be kind and patient with yourself instead of guilting yourself and telling yourself to do more, try harder. That's the problem with the abuse. And that's the problem with people coming over the top saying it's your fault when it's not. So yes, live in the truth, but understand it's a continuum and you got to start with where you're at.
Yeah, that's good advice. Because I think if you're an abuse survivor, you tend to be hard on yourself.
100%.
Yeah, you just do that.
Yeah, I barely could function for about 18 months just getting out of fight or flight after I got out. And you have to be kind to yourself.
Yes.
And you have to just know that it is slow. And I was helping. Yeah, it's a process. I was helping someone get out of a situation not that long ago. But the first thing I said to her when we met was, it's going to take some time. And that was the last thing they wanted to hear. But it becomes beautiful. It becomes beautiful time of freedom in Christ. It really does. So.
Yeah. And like I've said before, freedom does not come from avoiding things. Freedom comes from encountering things. And, if your spirit's alive, you're going to be able to get through it, but you're going to need support.
Yes.
Yeah, we all do. So any resources you can share that can further help with our listeners? I know you'd already mentioned a few, but we definitely would like to hear the resources that you have.
From my resources, my YouTube channel, Patrick Doyle, my website, patrickdoyle.life, that webinar I did this past weekend is still for sale there. You can go get the recording. and see it all and get the PDF and all that, it's still there. I highly recommend that because that's the core of developing internal strength and facing those things on your internal world. What happened to you rather than what's wrong with you, I think is a core to building strength. So, and I always want to encourage people, let's build strength before we get too far down the road of trying to set all these boundaries. If we build your internal strength, it's going to be a much easier road than you getting beat up and then trying to set a boundary. So, and that's a huge shift for most women because they've spent their lives trying to make it better.
Right.
That's not going to work. If it did, all the effort you put in was going to have an impact. No woman I've talked to would not be living in a euphoric life right now with a great husband because of the level of effort that they put in. But effort does not equal change.
Right. Because there's two people involved.
Exactly.
And I just saw this quote yesterday. We had the Plus One Parents as Single Moms podcast. She came on and talked about dating, and she posted this quote on one of her posts from Safe Haven yesterday.
Yeah.
Said healthy boundaries are less about building a wall to keep people out and more about honoring and cultivating what is special and sacred within you.
Agreed.
I just really like that.
I like that emphasis 100%, but you have to stop others too.
You do. Yeah.
From poisoning your beautiful soul.
Right. So you have to think of it in both ways, I think.
Yes,
Protecting
exactly.
yourself, but you also want to keep, your soul protected.
Yes.
Right. And you're not a person by setting the boundary too, instead of enabling another person.
You're being loving by setting those boundaries.
You are. But I'm telling you, there's so much rhetoric out there that says the opposite.
Yeah, we hear that. And I definitely recommend your video on boundaries. You have one specifically on boundaries too that our listeners can listen to get more information.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast. Where can our listeners get more information about you? And are you on social media?
Yes, they can go to, like I said, Patrick Doyle, Facebook, Patrick Doyle.life, my URL website, Instagram. I'm on Instagram, and YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm there, or my website. And lots of resources there, and glad to do anything I can to help.
Yeah, we just love your passion. And so, did you say that is there like a subscription that you have? I have
an online membership program called Pathway to Hope.
Okay.
Is that a separate website?
Yeah, you can find that at patrickdoyle.life.
Okay.
I did a full course of videos about all of this stuff. And it's, also my upcoming book, hopefully be out the end of this year, on the same subject called A Death of a Thousand Cuts. And so, that membership program I started because I saw the difficulty of women with no support and the church was not helping. So, and then last year I started a nonprofit called Pathway to Freedom. And we're helping women with financial abuse and getting free. That's also another way that if someone's out and they have the resources and they want to give, you can go to pathway-to-freedom.org and see everything you need to know about the organization, what we're doing, how to get involved.
That's great. Such a need for that. So that's awesome.
Being able to help people with support and practical information is great, but there's this nitty gritty part where we're paying, like I said before, we're paying for this woman to live in a furnished place because her husband left her with nothing, and where's she going to get that help? The church isn't going to help her.
That's amazing. Thank you for doing that. I mean, we deal with that every day, and there's a lack of shelters. There's like a 2-month wait.
Yeah, we've been talking about shelters. There's not enough of them.
There's lots of things that need to be taking place, from legal help to childcare to food. And so that's why I'm trying to build Pathway to Freedom's income so we can help many, many, many more people. And, helping a woman get out of this is not $100, $200, this is thousands, tens of thousands of dollars per person.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
I know there's lots of people out there that helping women and children get free. They'd be glad to give to that. But, I'm just in the beginning phases of getting that marketed and out there. But
the sad part about my experience is, like you were talking about earlier, is I wasn't financially dependent on him at all. I was the one that worked.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any issues. I just didn't know that there were resources out there. And so that was why it was so important for me to start this nonprofit, to let people know that there's these resources. He wouldn't even let me be on social media. So how would I know there were any resources out there? I wasn't on social media until I got divorced. So
that's so good. And the more we do this, the more impact we're going to make.
Yeah. Yep. The more we can get it out there, and we like a word of mouth, and I'm constantly going places and meeting people every day. So the word is getting spread around there.
It is.
So, all right. Well, it was so nice to meet you, and thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. It's a wrap.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.